Okay, so today we are getting started with collection views, and this is similar to a table view. It's another way of displaying content, and actually I want to show you some examples. So let me grab my iPhone and see if I can share the screen. Can you let me know if you see my iPhone? I've never tried this before.
There it is.
Great. So this is an example of where we might see collection views. This is Instagram. And so we can see these could be implemented with a, let's see, we've got a number of things that we could look at. So along the top, this is most likely a collection view. Collection views allow you to have content that's scrollable. So I can see all these stories along the top. The bottom portion that I'm scrolling through, this could actually be a collection view, or it could actually be a table view. So I'm not entirely certain which one. Both are possible settings. If we go over to the search panel, what we're going to see is most likely a collection view. I've got a video cell, I've got image cells, and different types of content. And so it's going to sort of resize that content. If we look over on, if I go back to my, let's see, where can I see this? If I go back to maybe my feed, I can look at content in a grid view, and I can also look at content in another view. So this lets me sort of look at it in the list view, and I can see different types of content. So the grid view is an example of a collection view here. Collection views are used on a number of different applications. If we look at some of Apple's official applications, we'll see them in use as well. I'll take a look at the weather app. And within the weather app, we've got a somewhat complex layout. So along the top, we probably have some kind of stack view that's grouping the 3 bits of information: my location, the current status, and then the actual temperature. And this is an example of, if you're doing a UI table view controller, you wouldn't be able to customize the background. So what this is we're going to see a combination of things. We've got some collection views as well as some table views on the screen. And so by using a table view and a collection view rather than the controller variants, we can customize the background content. So I don't know if you can see, but the clouds move in the background. So there's an animation playing in the background. And that's only possible when you work with a UI table view or a UI collection view without the controller. So if we customize the experience. So as I'm scrolling down, this main content area that we're scrolling through, this is going to be a table view. But then within the table view, we actually have embedded collection views. So this is a collection view. And if I just sort of, let's see, and most likely that might be stack views or collection views embedded. And then we've got, I think we've got table views down at the bottom. So if I were to real quick create a screenshot of this, and I don't know, can I send this to my Mac? Let's see. I'll just take a screenshot on my Mac. That'll probably be easier. I hit the done button. 1 second. So if I wanted to mock this up, I'm going to see if I can. Nope, that's not what I want. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my desktop now. And I'll grab that image so that instead of me just hand waving here, we can talk about what we were just looking at. So here's the weather app, and I'll just start sort of annotating. So this up at the top, this is going to be probably a stack view, and you can imagine it just sort of being 3 elements back to back in a vertical arrangement. If I duplicate this right here, this is a collection view, and within this, we are going to have a collection view cell, which is just this portion right here. Below this, it kind of looks, this could be another collection view. I'm skeptical though. I think this might be stack views. So I think this is just a stack view. If I grab another one of these, I think we've got a horizontal stack view, and then we just got them layered for the days of the week. So I think this is just one big cell in the table view, whereas this is a collection view. So a collection view cell can then be composed of stack views. So we can use a stack view to have a title, the current condition, and the temperature. And so it's just another way of displaying content. When you look at these different screens in an iPhone app, you're going to start seeing patterns and things like this. So this is a really good example, I think, of how we can create complex user interfaces using a lot of different components and then presenting the information in a meaningful way. Does anyone have any questions about this? All right, so for today's class, we're going to be building a collection view. If you look over on the left side of my screen, we're going to be making a collection view that can display planets. And so we'll have the different planets. And we are also going to play around with the user defaults. So we played around with persisting some information using the property list encoder the other day. And today we're going to play around with another way that we can use, which is called the UserDefaults. These are generally used for certain settings. And so, for example, in this application, we have the 8 planets here. Since Pluto was reclassified as not a planet, some of us maybe think that it should still be a planet. And so we have the option in this application to turn Pluto back into a planet. So if I go to the settings screen, that will do a modal segue and show me a new screen. And here I have the option to select if Pluto is a planet or not. Changing this option will persist if the app is quit. So if I hit done, we should see Pluto appears. And then what I would expect is if I were to quit this application, if I go into the task switcher, and then I throw this away, and I go back into planets, we should see Pluto is still a planet. And if I go into the settings screen, we see that it is still checked. And I can turn it off, and turning that off and then hitting done, I see it's not here. Again, could try to go to the task switcher, drag up a little bit, let go, and then toss this away to quit it. It's going to terminate the app, and we start it up, and we see that Pluto is not here. So we're going to implement this logic to create a collection view. This will allow you to create more types of user interfaces like the weather app here. Any questions before we begin?
How are you able to completely shut down the app, like a cold restart?
To do that, so it's different. So it depends on what device we're on. If we're on an iPhone 10, style device, you have the home bar at the very bottom. This is the new home button. And you swipe up from the bottom. So what I'm doing is I'm clicking on this, and if you're on a trackpad, it's just a tap and then drag upwards. If you drag all the way, it's going to close it, so that's too far. You want it so that it's back here. And actually, this is another example of a collection view. We're looking basically at a customized collection view that's actually got a 3D effect that allows me to sort of go between apps. And here I can just grab this app, and if I just select it, it lets me move it up and down. If I drag it upwards and flick it, it's going to quit the app. The other way to do this is in Xcode. If you just stop the app that's running, that will do the same thing. John, I can't hear you.
Yeah. So what was the one you did that gets rid of the persistence, where it all goes back to the beginning, where Pluto's not a planet anymore? That was the question.
I'd have to change the setting. So turning this off, and it will go back. Once we save it once, it's going to load the data. So I'd have to change the code to prevent it from reloading that information.
Okay, so it's always going to persist. Your app always persists. There's no cold restart or anything.
The coldest restart, I guess you could get, is if I were to physically remove the app. So if I multitask out and I hold down on the icon, so if you do a long press on the app icons, that brings up the remove feature. And if I hit that delete button on the Planets app, this will delete its data. And the data that I'm doing right now should not be syncing. So if I were to run that with the play button, it's going to reinstall the app, launch the app, and it's going to be in its default state. So the default state is whatever I've coded in the application. And so in this case, Pluto is not a planet. But if I were to flip this over to here, we see it's a planet. It's saved that setting. I'll go ahead and I'll stop the app. I will remove it, hit delete, and then run it one more time. And I'm expecting that we won't see Pluto. And in case that's the fact. So that data is not persisted across deleting and reinstalling the app. There are other ways to do that, but we're not going to do that today.
Excellent. Thank you.
Josh, can you create a questions thread if you haven't already?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start with a starter project that's going to have all these images. I'm going to have you fork and clone this repository as a starting point. And I think I will be also, probably for simplicity, I'll be forking this repository. So let me share that link. And for the afternoon project, I would love it if we could do pair programming again. So work out some of the kinks that we had from last week and work collaboratively. So I think I'm going to do a demo of that at the end of class with Moses so that we can cover sort of what I'm expecting for that. Essentially, there's going to be one fork of the repository. So you're just going through these steps. You're just going to fork it to your account, and then we'll have you add your collaborator. So you'll be able to go into settings and then go to collaborators. You'll have to log in, and then you'll search for someone else to add to the project. So in this case, I can add Moses, add him as a collaborator. He'll get an email, and that will allow him to pull and push to this repository. Okay, so now that I've cloned this or sorry, I haven't cloned it yet. I've forked it. So this is my personal fork where I can keep track of my changes. And now Moses is a collaborator with me. On the code screen, I can get that special link. So remember, there's this little button to switch between HTTPS and SSH. Most likely you're using HTTPS, so just copy that. I'm going to copy the SSH version, which is essentially the same except slightly different. So it still does the same thing as the end result. I'm going to go into a folder and clone this. So once I've forked, I'll do a git clone, paste in my link with a command V, press enter, and that will pull that down. Is anyone having issues forking and cloning repositories or dealing with GitHub issues?
Yes, I have a login problem where it's really strange. I can commit via Xcode now, but I cannot commit via terminal.
Okay.
I get like an automatic error saying your login information is bad or something.
One, I have no idea if this is applicable to you, but one issue I had last year was my MacBook keyboard had a bad key that would sometimes press multiple Bs. So I don't know if you have a keyboard issue where it's maybe not typing what you expect. I had to get that fixed by Apple. So that's something to keep in mind. If you ever see a character on your keyboard that you're using, if it ever repeats. So if I was typing Bs, I would do like one B at a time, but sometimes I would get doubles or triples. Or sometimes as I'm typing one word, I would have like a B randomly inserted inside of a word. So I'd be typing one or something after writing Bob, and I would get something like this. So that might be a potential issue that you're having. Otherwise, we can investigate later with that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so now that I've got this local, I'm going to open it up. And actually, I didn't put that where I wanted, so I'm going to move this into my class folder. And then I'll go into class. And open up that Xcode project. All right, so when we open this project, we'll see that there's a bunch of folders. I'm going to hold the Option key and I'm going to minimize, and then I'm going to maximize, and that will expand all of the files. So if you've never done this, this is a nice way to expand all of these so that you don't have to click on each one, which is a nice way to see all of the code in this file. Can you raise your hand once you've got this project cloned to your system?
Is the folder view controller supposed to show up in red? Mine is red. The word view, yeah, right there.
It shouldn't, but there might be an issue with that. So if that's the case, I would just select it and delete it. So it should be empty. And if you, one thing that we could do before you delete it is if you show in Finder. So if you right click and show in Finder, it might not see the view controllers folder, so that might be missing. So maybe this is something I have to fix on this. So you can delete it and re-add it, and that should fix the problem. So I'll just delete mine just to see what happens, and then I will re-add that. And then you just do a new group. and then call it view controllers. And so that folder is now here. Anytime Xcode can't find a folder, generally these folders and this view is going to mirror what we see in Finder. So that looks like that's something I have to fix for this project, for the starter code. Okay, so that should run. Actually, no, that shouldn't do anything. We're going to get an error message because we do not actually, if we look at the error message, so again, anytime you see these error messages, look through the output. The only real thing that matters here is this bottom one. The others are just kind of garbage from Apple. There is no default view controller in the storyboard, so nothing is going to show up. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to go through what we're going to do. And our first plan of attack, we've got 2 screens that we want to implement. So let's go ahead. We're going to need to set up the storyboard. And we're going to have a collection view. We are going to have a settings view. And then we're going to connect those to 2 different code files. So I think we're going to call it a planets collection view controller.swift. We're going to create a settings view controller.swift. We'll connect those things. We are going to work a little bit with user default. So it's the NS user defaults. And this will allow us to do persistence. That will allow us to save and load some information. It's just going to be one setting that we're going to be saving. And then we're going to be customizing these interfaces. So let's see. The other thing we need to set up is we will also set up with the collection view, we're going to set up a special planet collection view cell. So this is going to be very similar to what we've done with the table view cell. This is going to have 2 attributes. We're going to have a text title, and then we're going to have an image. That's what we saw in the app when we were running it. Now that I've run my new app, that's actually hiding it. So if I run it one more time, we can sort of see what we're trying to implement today. And then we're going to set up the toggle to allow us to toggle this. We can use an unwind segue. So we've seen the unwind segue, and I think we'll wrap up with that to go back. And at the end, I'm going to go over pair programming again for the project.
Paul, is there a reason we use that the unwind segue is better than just dismissing or popping back to the main view controller? Is it just if we have like multiple screens, or what's that useful for?
Just to show you how it works. You'll see it in some apps, so being comfortable with it, I think, is important. And I would say, out of a personal preference, I never do it. So it's just something to be aware of so that you can see it and understand it. But you may not use it. I don't like using it because I find it confusing to follow where the logic is going. So I like to have it usually done programmatically in code.
Thank you.
Good question. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's look through the code that we have in here. I've got a planet class already defined, so we don't need to worry about that. This is it's actually a structure, and we have an initializer that takes a string and an image name. So you may have had to work with images from the asset catalog yesterday, And in order to load them, there is a convenience method on the UI image class that allows us to load images from our asset catalog. All we need to do is provide names. So if I do let's do a option, and then I want everyone to do option and then click on where it says named, and that should show you information about this method. After you get that to pop up, I want you to raise your hand. I want to make sure that everyone knows how to do this. And if you can't get this to work, please let me know right now. We're hitting the option key and then clicking. Okay, so this is gonna load an image. Now, if we provide it with a name that does not exist, it's going to fail and it will return nil. So this is an example of a failable initializer. When you see a init question mark, that means we either get an image, a UI image, or we get nil. So that's how you can read this. And if we go over to our planet controller, this is a code file that we provided that just has a mapping for the names to the actual file names of the images. So we've got a sort of a human readable string, which is Mercury with a capital M, like we would expect. The image name is a lowercase m, and there is no extension. So we don't need to provide the extension. It will do a search when we use that function. So basically for each of these planets, it's going into the planet.swift, and then it's trying to load the image when we use our initializer. So it's trying to set that image. If it can't find the image, can anyone tell me what's going to happen on line 15?
Nil will be assigned to self.image.
Yeah, kind of.
It's just going to crash, right?
Yeah, it will crash.
Yeah, so this is going to crash, and that's because this will return nil. But when we do a exclamation at the end, that's going to try and force unwrap, and that's going to try and make it a value. And whenever we do that to a value that is nil, our app will actually crash. So this is just something to keep in mind. We're providing this code. This is potentially risky if this was based on images that didn't exist, but this is going to let us know right away if we have a configuration issue. So we'll come back to this probably once we get the planets loading, because right now we don't have a view controller. So that's something to keep in mind. This will...
Hey, Paul, what are the situations where we would use that force unwrap?
I typically, for this type of situation, well, it really depends. If it's a user content, you really have to be careful because your app will crash and then the user's like, what? And that's not a good experience. If it's something that you can control, so if there's a predefined amount of planets, and this is always going to be provided in the application bundle, it's more okay to do this because then you know, okay, I'm missing, like if Uranus was missing, I would know right away that I was missing the image file. And so if that didn't exist in my asset catalog, I would then be able to go in here and be like, okay, where is this image? Why is it not, or did I misspell it or something? So this name needs to match. You'll notice that all of these are lowercase. And so force unwrapping will allow us to know right away that that's basically what I would consider a project configuration issue. We generally don't want to force unwrap at runtime when it's not project configuration related. And a lot of companies and teams actually have policies against force unwrapping because it's a big source of crashing. It's actually a source of some crashing in my own app right here. So I've got a bug. If I go full screen in this app and I think jump between windows or something, my app will crash because there's some logic in here that didn't take into account multi-monitor setups and full screen and sort of going back and forth. So that's an example of an unwanted crash. It was when I do that. I don't know. I might be able to get it to crash. I don't remember. I don't remember the repro step, so it may or may not crash. Still not crashing. And that's like the worst kind of crash, when it's like not easy to reproduce. So right now I wasn't able to reproduce it. I do have a bug report in my bug log, and I know how to reproduce it, but off the top of my head, I don't exactly remember the steps. So that's an example where I have code that force unwraps, and it's assuming that the window exists, but sometimes the window doesn't exist when you're exiting full screen. And then the app just fails, and that's not good. So if someone was using that for a conference, I've got people using my app for conference timing, so the speaker can see how much time they have left to talk. If they're doing that, that's not a reliable experience. So we want to be mindful of that type of situation.
Yeah, Dylan mentioned that he uses forced unwrapping during development, and that way, if there's a problem, it will cause a crash that he can, quickly identify.
Yeah, and for the most part, like if it's an example code, it's okay. But when it's production code, you have to be more critical about, is this the best thing to do here?
Yeah, that was the thing. The caveat was that you had to go back and be diligent about correcting those things.
And the challenge is, if you forget after you've done some prototyping and you're like just experimenting, you forget to go back and fix it, then you have a bug that's going to go unnoticed for a little bit of time. Okay, so let's set up this first screen. We want a collection view. So I'm going to jump into the main.storyboard. And then in here, we don't see anything. So we're going to open the object library. We're going to add a collection view. So you're going to search for collection in the top bar. And we're going to see a few different options here. If you're on the grid view, you'll see these icons. The collection view controller is what we're going to start with. This won't let us have like a background animation, but this is a good starting point. So don't worry about customizing it right now. If you want, just like with a table view, you could use a collection view. If I bring that back up, you can use the collection view if you have an existing view controller, and you can position it or make it as big or as small as you want. So we were looking at the weather app, and this has a collection view that is embedded inside of a table view cell. So with a collection view, we're going to see this single element, and it's going to have a default sort of grid layout. And if I select the collection view itself, that should give me some properties. If we set items to something like 20, you can kind of see what the layout's going to do. So go ahead and do that. Just to see what it's going to do. This is a flow layout. We can customize it so we can provide totally different experiences. You could do like a circle interface. You could do all kinds of crazy things with some custom code. For now, we're just going to do flow, which is basically going to go from top to bottom, and it's going to be oriented left to right. So as you add more images or content, it's going to sort of fill out. So that's kind of how this is. We could set it up to be a horizontal, and so it would tile things differently. And I'm going to switch it back to vertical just to show you. On the size inspector screen, we can customize the cell width. And so what we should see is that if we make the cell width, let's say 250, we're going to see that we have long and then short rows, and we can make this also 250. So that would be more like an Instagram sort of feed. If we go a little bit bigger and match the actual size of the device, we can actually get into a layout that would be similar to Instagram. So on this particular device, my width is 375, so I could do something like 375 for the width and 375 for the height, and that would give me these big blocks. So that's something that we could do. If you wanted your planets to be big blocks, totally doable. That will set that up. Now, the thing to keep in mind is if I were to switch devices, so I'm currently, I guess I'm set up on an iPhone 8, but if I was on the iPhone XR, what we're going to notice is that the width is going to be different. So one thing that you have to keep in mind is that if you want the collection view to match the size of the device, you might need to take into account the width of the device. And the width is going to be bigger on the iPhone XR. So if you switch over to iPhone XR, go ahead and look at it, and you should see that our boxes do not fill side to side. All right, so I'm going to switch this back down to, I'm going to select my collection view. So click on the overall collection view, go back to the attributes inspector, change items just to 1. We only need 1 item. So that should remove all those extra cells. And then let's go ahead and let's customize this. I don't want to do 375. I want to do something a bit smaller. So let's see what that's going to look like. I want to do something like maybe 120 for the width, and then I'm thinking 140 for the height. So something like that will give me maybe 3 across. If I want to double check to see what this is going to look like, I can set this back to 20 items just to see how it's going to sort of lay out the content. So you can get a preview of what that's going to look like. Generally, we don't want to have these extra cells because I think we'll get a issue once we add a cell identifier if there's duplicate cells. So I'll set this back to 1 once I know sort of how it's going to look. And then for the size inspector, just make sure you're at 120 and 140. If you have this set up and you've got 1 cell again, I want you to go ahead, set the cell identifier to a planet cell, and then raise your hand.
Paul, what's the difference between setting the size on the cell itself versus the collection view?
I don't think, I'm not sure. I think the overall collection view will override the size. So if I select custom cell right now and I try to make this 150, will that update my collection view? That doesn't update the collection view, and the collection view is going to really be the thing that drives it. So I'll switch that back to default. If I resize this manually, I'm going to see on the collection view, it should have updated that. So I would always base it off of the size in the collection view. That's going to be the starting point. Sometimes though, you might, if you wanted to have like boxes like we saw on Instagram, if you want to have different size content, that's either an API call that you can override, or if you know in advance that in a video is always going to be like a square shape, you could have 2 different cells. So in that case, if I wanted to have like a video cell, I might create 2 items, and then I might customize this second one. So let's say this is going to be a video cell for Instagram. I would then override this layout so that I could set up my constraints appropriately. So I might do, I don't know, 200, 250 by 250, something like that. And this isn't necessarily, these are like prototype cells. So I've got a different identifier and this would get loaded differently.
Did you say one overrides the other?
We'd have to test it. The behavior sometimes is, I feel like it's changing, and I don't have a specific answer on that.
Okay. I don't want to derail, so we can resume.
Yeah. So I'm going to remove that. I don't need that one. All right, so I want to customize this, and we're going to add an image and a label. So find an image and a label. I find it best to try and resize these to fit within what we have here. If it sort of flows outside, it makes it a little bit challenging to work with. So I'm going to resize my image view so it's going to fit. You might want to zoom in since it's smaller. And then we're going to add a label on the bottom. Now, I think this is going to give us a little bit of auto layout issues. I haven't been able to figure out a good way to do this just yet, but again, setting this to the size, oh, that's weird. It moved my screen. Setting this to how big we want it should help us a little bit, and then bringing the image down. And if I want the standard distance, I should be able to find that there. I don't think there are any margins on this, so it's really up to us how we want this to be laid out. So if I want the standard spacing, I can go ahead and do that. Once you have these two elements, I want you to embed into a stack view, and it looks like that got bigger. For some reason, my stack view went outside the bounds. If that's the case, we're going to try a couple things to get this to work. I'm going to make sure that my spacing is 8. I'm going to make sure that my alignment and distribution are set to fill. And then what I'm going to try and do is add some constraints. So I'm going to do the add constraints button, that is the square TIE Fighter button over in the bottom right corner. And I'm going to set it so that there's a 0 offset from the top. There's going to be a 0 offset from the left. There's going to be a 0 on the right. Right now I'm seeing -40. I don't want that. And I'm seeing -40 on the bottom, and I don't want that. So I'm going to do zeros all around. So I should see 4 I-beams. And then we're going to hit add 4 constraints, and it's probably going to look a little funky. So now it's showing me there's some layout issues. So I will select that stack view again. There's a little sort of recycle type icon. It's called update frames. That is to the left of the embed in stack view. If I click on that, or if I use the keyboard shortcut, we might see something change, we might not. Under the editor menu, you will also find this. This is the update frames method. If you look at my screen, that keyboard shortcut is Command Option equals. So if I click on that, we'll see if it tries to update, and no, it does not. So that's no fun. And if I look at this, it's going to tell me it needs an X position. I don't really believe it. Let's see, if I resize, does that change anything? Nope. I'm going to try and throw an image in here, see if that makes it any more happy. I don't think it will, but I'll just put Mars. And that seemed to make it happier on the horizontal directions-ish a little bit, but not really. Give me 1 second. So what I did to sort of make it a little bit happier is I added a width and a height constraint. And I'm not sure if this is a glitch in Xcode 10 because I haven't seen this behavior before when I worked with this collection view. One other option I could do if I wanted to is I could also create an XIB file that would have this. I'm not going to go over that right now, but maybe I'll look into that later.
Well, the way that I've always got around that is putting it in a view and setting a height and width on the view, and it kind of satisfies it.
Yeah, the challenge is, so you're putting the stack view on a view?
Yeah, so I usually just put a view and then put everything, and then set a height and width for the view, and that's how I kind of get around it.
Could it have something to do with the content mode of the overall cell being like top left or whatever?
I don't think so.
I'll play around with this and tell you what I find, Paul.
Yep. I'll just try one more thing, and I will remove the constraints. Yep. No, that was no good. This image is really big, so if you remove the constraints, it's going to show us the white space in the top left corner. Part of the issue here is that this plant cell, its size is going to be dependent on the cell itself as well as the collection view, and that seems to cause some issues. So I'm just going to pin these views and see what happens. So I will pin my view, and then I will make a recommendation on what you should do.
I may have gotten something to work.
Okay, I got it. If you will set a height and width on the view and then center the view horizontally and vertically, that's how I got it to go away.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'll try doing it again from scratch just to go over the steps I'm going to do. I'm going to drag a label out. Actually, before I do that, why don't we grab a view like Cameron is recommending? So I'm going to grab a view. And that search is not very helpful. So the view is going to be that white square inside of the gray square. So I'm going to drag that out. I'm going to resize it to fit the size of the collection view. And then I am going to ask this to pin itself in place with auto layout. So I'll do the pin to the edges. So I'll pin all to zeros if I've laid it out so that it's set. Make sure that I have all of those. I'll add those 4 constraints. Then I'm going to, maybe I'll throw in the stack view first. So let's try and throw in a stack view. And I want to do a vertical stack view, so I'll just pop this on top of that view. That should embed it inside of the view. So if I'm looking at, say, view and then stack view, I'm going to resize that and resize that. And just try to make it so that it is, you should see the crosshairs if it is lined up inside. So it should like this on my screen if you're resizing the stack view. And then I will pin that in place and we'll see if this helps. We'll add those 4 constraints and we're still kind of golden here. So next what I want to do is drop a label and an image view. So let's grab a label and then let's grab an image view. And you should see a little pop-up for that to fill in on your stack view. I'm going to drop it and it's going to fill. And that seems to be somewhat happy. To customize this label, I'm going to center it. And then for the image view, If I want these to be aspect ratio, so squares, what I can do is I can do a right click and drag and do aspect ratio, or I should be able to see the same thing down at the bottom. I should be able to, if I click on my image view, select the, oh, and it doesn't let me edit it here. I'll select the aspect ratio down here, and we can add that one constraint. Now you might see something like 120 out of 119 or some random number there. If you select that aspect ratio, if we want it to be square, the multiplier needs to be 1 or 1 to 1. So you can go ahead and just press 1 in the multiplier field. So if you see this little pop-up when you're editing your aspect ratio, this will make both the width and the height equal. So doing that might rearrange some of the content. And does that, seems to be satisfying everything. And now if I wanted to test it, I could throw it in Mars, and I see that Mars now fits. So I've got no layout issues on this one. I'm going to go ahead and delete my first planet cell. So my first planet cell had some issues. So if you redid yours, that should be fine. Don't worry if it's not perfect. This will still work if you don't have everything 100%. We might see some weirdness, but it's a good starting point. Can I get a 1 to 3 on the layout for this stack view and planet cell?
Is there a control for the planet cells that can just to help you with the spacing? Because when I put 20 cells, I only see 2, one on the right, one on the left, instead of a row, or instead of 3.
What did you put?
My width and height for the cell is 120, 140.
Yep.
But when I put 20 cells in, I have the one on the left, and then one pops up on the right.
Did you change your iPhone from 8 to XR?
Say it again.
Did you change your iPhone in the simulator from 8 to XR?
Yep.
Yeah, so on different devices, we might see different presentations.
Paul, what's your spacing in your stack view there?
Oh, okay.
I did an 8 on the stack view, and I'm going to be honest, this is a little bit glitchy. So right now I just updated the thing, and it's kind of bugging out. So let's see if we switch off and back. So we see this update. So I'm going to say that sometimes with stack views and sometimes with even collection views, if it's glitching out on you and it's not looking like you expect, maybe switching to a code file and then coming back in, that will get it to relay out. There are bugs in Xcode, and this is probably one of them that we should report to Apple, that cause weird behaviors. In terms of spacing, who asked that? Was that Dan? I'm just doing the 8 for the stack view. I might not have fixed that in this version. So right now it's set to 0. I would want it probably set to 8. Since I made all these items, I'm going to just remove them all. So I'm going to go back down to 1 because it basically duplicated that view, and I really don't want duplicate views. And then I'm going to switch back to the iPhone XR, and maybe I'll switch screens just to make sure that it relays out properly. I will select my stack view, and I will set the spacing to 8. And that might make things not fit properly. I don't know. That looks like it squished our other view. So this is an example where maybe the 1-to-1, I don't want it to be a high priority. So I'm going to try something, making that lower. That doesn't seem to update. I'm going to say this is a little bit wonky, so I'm just going to probably leave it as is, and we can come back to it once we actually have data inside, because it's pushing my label down, and I don't know if this will look, how this will look when we have it running on an actual device. Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back. We'll fix this up, we'll connect it to code, and we'll connect that data so that we can see things happening.
Paul, I have a error that I don't know how to troubleshoot. You mind if I share my screen quick?
Yeah, sure thing.
Okay.
Everyone else, take a break, get up, stretch your legs.
Can you see my
squats or
screen?
push-ups or something? Yes. Okay. Did you add a code file?
What do you mean by code file?
You have to change your team in the main file. If you go there, and you go, oh, you changed it?
Right here?
Yeah.
Yep, I changed it.
It was complaining about a file folder not existing. If you go back to the error.
Yeah. Ugh, it's not, I can't click on the red.
Go to the left panel and click on the little over you've got the issues navigator. It's the 5th icon from the left side.
Is this what you're talking about?
Yep. And you click on that, that should take us to the same thing. So this is telling me, I'm looking at the error message, it's saying that it can't find a file. And it says that you've got this planets, views, collection view controllers, new group, and then it's your planet collection view cell.
Is that the file that's missing?
So it sounds like you made a group and then you renamed it maybe to something else. So try, which file is that? Does one of those not load?
Does one of them not load? How can I
that
tell
one's
it?
not loading. You just click on Planet Collection View Cell. So see if you remove.
How can you tell if it's loading or not?
It's not loading. You clicked on it, it did not load. Click on another file. You should see the other file load. If that file does not load, then we have another problem with that one.
Did you class the storyboard? Did you add a class to the collection view controller scene? Did you add the class?
Oh, I see. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, so for these,
yeah, I was trying to run it without actually hooking this scene up
but
to
that's not
anything.
the problem. That's not the problem.
Oh, it's not?
No, it's
I
not.
thought maybe that you hooked up the wrong class.
No, I haven't hooked up any classes to a scene.
Yeah.
No,
So I thought that was a
Xcode
problem.
can't find the file. We're having, and it's not displaying correctly on the left. So right now, only that file is existing. I'm wondering, can you right click on planets at the top and then say show in Finder?
This one right here?
Yep. Show in Finder, that third one. And so if you double click on that planets folder. Okay. And double click on views. Double click on collection view controllers. Okay, go up a directory. Double click on the other one. And then if you click on one of those and just hit spacebar, what do we see? Okay, so what I want you to do is go back and just right click on Planets Collection View Controller and say remove from Xcode.
Delete all of them.
Just hit delete and just say remove reference. Okay, I guess that's good.
It didn't give me.
Do the same thing for the Planet Collection View cell. And now right click on where, right click on view controllers and say add. Add files to planets. And then find those in those folders.
Did not want to do that.
Okay, let's remove the view controllers folder. I think that's causing an issue.
If I remove this folder, will
Just hit delete. Just remove reference. Remove those two other folders you have. And let's go back. Can you go back to Finder?
yes.
Can you just drag that file to your desktop?
This file to my desktop.
No. Go back into planets, go into view controllers.
This shouldn't be here. Just delete that.
Yeah, I mean, we might just need to add these files again. I'm not really certain.
I'll
There's
just delete this and then I'll just clone it again. Remove it from my
I
clones.
don't think you need to clone it again. I think there was a bug with the view controllers not being in sync with the file system. So we might just need to create those code files again. I would get rid of that view controllers folder, and then we'll just recreate with the rest of the class. So
Okay.
I delete that.
Okay. All right. Hope that works. Thanks.
That's a weird bug.
Okay, so what I want you to do is go ahead and create a planet. Hold on. If you have the view controllers folder, please remove it as it looks like it's going to cause some issues. So just double check before we add any more code files. Remove the view controller folder. Go right click on planets, show in Finder, and I want you to make sure that there's no view controller folder. And then we're going to go ahead and add. Let's just add the code directly. Let's not worry about organizing it. So I'm just going to right click on app delegate, and I'm just going to say new file. And I'm going to create a Swift file. And then we're going to do a planet collection view controller. So I want you to create the planet's collection view controller. So you should be creating this one, and then I want you to create the collection view cell. So I'm going to take a quick break, and then I will be right back. Just go ahead and create these two files, and we'll get started with that. And you can go ahead, if you are able to connect the user interface for the image and the title for that collection view cell using the attributes inspector and the assistant editor.
Michael, your mic is still open.
Did he say to add both of those as Swift files, or should they be Cocoa Touch class files?
You can do it either way. It doesn't really matter.
Wait, but Paul did it like that because it was crashing, right? There was like funky errors.
Maybe that's why he did it. I stepped away for a bit.
Okay, because I think that's why he did it, because he told us to delete the view controllers folder and then just add it by Swift file. Wait,
Yeah.
Paul, you added it like that?
The folder itself was the glitchy part.
The folder is a little bit corrupt. It's not in sync with the file system, so Xcode's bugging out.
Okay, but you added the view controller file using clicking the Swift button because of that, right? Or is there a reason why you added the file that way instead of?
I just wanted to do it from scratch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you could use the other one as well. Both are fine, but I'm not adding it to the view controllers folder because that was not properly set up, or I think it was done in a previous version of Xcode, and Xcode's changed its behavior for how it synchronizes changes to the file system. Okay. So before it didn't used to create folders, and now a new feature, and I think Xcode 9, and we're now on Xcode 10, was to sort of synchronize the two, but for some reason there was no view controllers, and then it was super confused, and so Michael was trying to get that to work, and it just wasn't.
Okay.
So Git doesn't save folders unless there's a file in it. It only saves files, and since the project has
that's such a good point
just in there, that's what the problem is.
Yeah, you're probably right. So that probably corrupts it and makes it super funky.
So to fix the Git repo, all you'd have to do is just put a dummy file in there, say placeholder or something.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to add these two files and I'm going to connect them up.
Wait, so we should not do the Cocoa Touch class because
I'll do one of each. So I'll do one without, one with. So this one's going to be, we're doing collection view. So UI collection view, and I'm going to go for collection view cell. So this is going to be our planet collection view cell. So hopefully I'm naming these the same as what I wrote here. So planet collection view cell and planet collection view controller. So I'll go ahead and create this. So the main benefit of when we do that is it will subclass for us, and sometimes it'll populate with some information. So what you need if we look at the collection view cell first, this needs to be a UICollectionViewCell subclass. This will allow us to connect much like a UI table view cell. So if you got stuck on that, that's okay. It's your first time seeing it. This is going to behave basically the same exact way. We need to define this class. So you got to import UIKit if you started from scratch, and to make sure that you subclass from the UICollectionViewCell. Once we do that, we should be able to hook this up to the user interface. So I'm going to go into the assistant editor, and I will select my collection view and then my planet cell. And I'm going to set the planet cell's class type to our custom planet collection view cell. And that should allow me to synchronize this, but it's not populating with the correct information. So I'm going to see what this says. And I might need to build. So I'm going to do a command B to build. Let's see what happens. So it's telling me it's unreachable. We're going to have to set the entry points. It's a problem that we're going to have to fix, but it's still not. Okay, now it's showing me the planet collection view cell. So make sure you have it build. If it succeeds, then we can connect these two items. Well, actually no, since it's here, let's go ahead and just connect it. So we're going to have two attributes that we're looking for. We want to have an image view and a text label. So I'm just going to right click on the image view and I'm going to drag that over to create an outlet. And I would just say image view. And hopefully if these two are seeing each other, then we can connect it and it won't give us an error. And then I'm going to try again and do the same thing for the label. So we'll just call it a text label. Now we don't have to worry about collisions with the collection view. There are no default collection view cells, so we can call these whatever we want. The same is not true though when we're working with a table view. So image view and text label are totally fine to use here. And that's what you should have. Stephen, do you have this working or are you stuck?
I have it working.
Okay, so once you've got those outlets, I'm going to make sure that my view controller is the starting point. So I'm going to click on the view controller scene, go to the attributes inspector, select the initial view controller. We should see that little arrow appear so that we have a starting point. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to embed this into I want to embed this into a navigation controller. So I'm going to switch back to a single view. I'm going to click on the embed in after I select the view controller itself, embed in, and then navigation controller. This will give us a navigation bar. On the navigation bar, I want you to add a bar button item. So let's go ahead, add a button. So look for button and you should see the item one. This is the thing that goes into the tab bar. So go ahead and add that. And we'll just call this item settings. And I think we'll come back to this. So this is a starting point. If I hit the run, nothing's really going to happen yet. We want to add one more code file. So we've got the planets view collection view controller. If you've added this file, if you go into it, now mine is blank, so I'm going to start this one from scratch. So this is going to import UI kits, planets collection view controller. So the different templates that we use, they're not magical, they're just auto-filling some of this information for us. So this is going to be a UI collection view controller subclass. And we are going to, let's see, we're going to have some methods that we can override in here in order to actually display stuff, much like the table view. So there's two methods that we're going to look at. And if I do collection view, I should start to see these methods appear. Since we're subclassing from UI collection view controller, there's two things that have already happened for us. This class has its data source set to itself and it has its delegate set to itself. So we've got two sort of delegate protocols for the UI collection view controller. We can pull open the documentation with a option click on the class type. And at the very bottom of this list, if you scroll in this quick help window that appeared, you can click on open in developer documentation and you can read more about it. And this will give you insight into how this works. There is a delegate protocol, and I'm going to pull open Dash just to jump through this documentation for you. So if we look at UI collection view, we've got the controller, and then we also have the delegate down here. So the delegate is going to respond to input. So this manages selection, this manages highlighting, removing, adding things, layout changes, actions, where the focus is, like which cell is selected, and some other behavior that we can customize. The data source will provide some other methods for getting the size and the number of sections, the number of items. Instead of rows, we're going to refer to things as items, getting the actual views for the different things. We even have a supplemental view that we can override. There's reordering, and there's index titles as well. So there's a lot of different things that go into a collection view. And these two things allow us to override the behavior. So that is already set. There's a default implementation that I believe does nothing. And what we'll want to do is override that. So anytime you're starting from scratch with one of these methods, autocomplete's really helpful. And if autocomplete's not working, just restart Xcode, and usually it starts working again. Sometimes it gets confused and it will stop working. Another thing you can do besides restarting Xcode is to do a Command-Shift-K to clean the build folder. All right, so when this is up, we're going to see some of these delegate methods that we can override, and we'll also see some of the data source methods. So the data source method that I'm seeing right here is the number of items in section. So if we press enter, this should populate. And as a sanity check, I'm going to return 5. So let's just get something on the screen. And then let's see, there's another method that we need. It's going to be very similar to the table view method. And if we scroll through this list, we should see it, or we can go back to the documentation if we don't know what it is called. And there should be some kind of cell at index path. And so kind of hard to read the autocomplete here. So if you're ever unsure, just go back to the documentation for whatever API you're looking at. And so if I'm looking at the data source, in order to get the view, there's this cell for item at index. So this is what I want to use. If you've used the Cocoa Touch class, it may have already pre-populated this for you. So I'm going to say cell at index path. And I'm starting to see that it's matching up. So for item at index path is what I want. If I had a smaller font, it might be easier to see the full method signature, but because I've got it larger for display here, it's harder to find what I'm looking for. So here we're going to dequeue a cell, much like we would dequeue in a table view. I'm going to do CollectionView.dequeue and press enter. We're going to do our planet cell. And then I'm going to pass it the index path. Now I want to hold on to this, so I'm going to need to create a cell variable. And that should give me the cell. I want to customize it. So in order to work with this, I'm going to do a force unwrap. So I'm going to convert, I'm not going to do force unwrap. I'm going to do a force conversion. This is potentially risky and not always recommended, but this is a potential configuration issue. So if I was trying to create a planet collection view cell, so I want access to the planet collection view cell, this would crash if it's not the right type. So if it can't find this and it's not configured properly, that's kind of a programmer error. And then I'm just going to return this cell. And what am I doing wrong here? Oh no, this is the wrong one. Okay, so that is autocomplete not helping me. So I grabbed the wrong method. So I'm going to go back to the documentation. The method I'm looking for is cell for item at index. So I'm going to make sure that I write collection view cell for item at index, because it just gave me this. I didn't realize it. It says will display cell for item at index path, and that's not what we want to be doing. So I'm going to do collection view and then cell for item at all right, so this is the method I want. It's still clipping a lot of the text, which makes it really hard to find the right one. The other solution I would say in this type of situation, if you can't find it, is copy and paste from the documentation and insert it. So what you should be seeing is override func collection view. I'll make this bigger again. It should say cell for item at index path, and it should have a return type, a UICollectionViewCell. All right, so I'm going to just grab this code, I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to paste it down here, and I'll get rid of the wrong function because I don't want that there. And I'm going to...
Can you just put it in Slack for us, please?
Oh, can you explain again why? I don't know if you're casting it as Planet Collection View Cell at the end there.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Why do you have to do that? Isn't cell already known as a Planet Collection View Cell?
So if I don't do this, then I can't say cell dot text view or text field or text label, whatever I called it. It's just not there. And that's because a default collection view cell, if we look at the type, I'll option click on it. This is a UI collection view cell. I want it to be my custom cell, which is going to be this class. We connected these two attributes. These don't exist on a standard UI collection view cell. So we're overriding the behavior so that we can have a more customized experience.
Gotcha.
So now if I convert this, I now have the image view and I have the text label. So for the text label, I'm just going to say Mars just for fun. And now I want to just verify that things are working, and then I will do a commit and push my stuff, and I'll share this fork as well. So if you want to grab this, you'll be able to see what I have here. So we have not connected this to the user interface, or at least I have not. So I'm going to go into my storyboard file, and I'm going to make sure that my class is set for the main.storyboard. So I'm going to select the collection view controller. I'm going to go over to my identity inspector and set up the Planet collection view controller. I will do a build, make sure things are sort of working, and I will test it, and then I will do a commit if this is working. All right, so we see what I was hoping to see. I see 5 Marses, and they all have the default icon because that's what I have set. So I will do a commit and then give me a 1 to 3 rating on how you're feeling with this so far. And then let me know if you need me to jump into anything. All I'm doing as I'm doing my commit is I'm just refreshing my memory as to what I've done here. So added a stub implementation of the UI collection view controller.
Paul, could you show what you had for the cell.swift file, Planet Collection View Cell? So it's just those outlets.
Yep.
Why is mine not?
Blair, are you subclassing UICollectionViewCell?
Let's see. Yeah. Here, let me try it again. Collection view cell. Huh. Yeah, it's just not wanting to drop an outlet there.
Yeah, this is where it's a little bit finicky. So make sure that you've built it. And then Blair, if you would mind sharing your screen, then we could maybe dive in.
Yeah, let's see.
I'm getting has no member text label for the cell.
I did too. I just typed it out and it worked. Blair, did you set it in Storyboard? Did you set the view controller?
I think so.
Let's see. Set the cell subclass. Yeah, and the class here.
Is that the right class? Is that the cell? I can't, it's clipping, so I don't know if it's actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Collection views.
So go into the assistant editor.
Okay.
And you did a build already with Command B. Okay. And now can you create the connections from not the cell? You have to click on the actual image and the actual label. So you might need to expand that.
Okay. That's probably, yeah, that's it. I was just doing it from the cell.
So call that one image view.
Thank you.
And then hopefully that connects. Okay, that looked like that worked, and you can do the same for the label.
Let's see.
Excellent. So now if you jump back over to the collection view controller file. So now you should be able to say cell dot text label is equal to dot text is Mars. So inside that function there, before the return. If you do it after the return, nothing will happen.
Oh, okay.
So for everyone, the return is the last statement in a function. Unless you have like if else statements with it. So if it's at the very bottom, it will never execute code underneath that. And Xcode should warn you about that. So we should see, what did we call it?
Planet cell.
And then the outlet you just connected, you had image view, and then was it text label or was it just label?
Would be cell dot.
I see image label.
There it is.
So then just set that dot text to something, just as a sanity check. So you could say Earth.
You have the image view. You need image label.
Yeah, image label.
Oh, that's all.
Cool. Now run it, see if that does anything. If you have this working, can you raise your hand?
Mine's just saying the collection view cell has no member text label. I've already cast it as Planet Collection View Cell.
So make sure that you're spelling it correctly or that it's actually connected. Did you look in your collection view cell?
I have both IB outlets.
You're calling it the same thing that you see on the screen?
Oh no. There you go. I named mine label. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Okay, so next we want to pull out data. So we can create a Planet controller to get that data. So I'm just going to say let Planet controller at the bottom of we're in the Planet's collection view controller.swift file. Let's go ahead and create a Planet controller. This is basically just going to have our data. So I should see Planet controller, and we'll just call it a default initializer. So this will basically set up our planets array. So instead of displaying just generic data, we can actually go in and ask this to display its content. So I will say planet controller and at lowercase p. For whatever reason, autocomplete seems to always prefer the class, which is the capital P. So a lot of times you might be writing this out and it wants to uppercase. Make sure it's the actual variable, which is lowercase. So we're doing camel case, so it's a lowercase first letter. So this should match with this on my screen. So ask this for the planets array, and I will ask it to tell me the count. Next, what I want to do is I actually want to use the data. So I'm going to try and create a planet. I'm going to ask for the array of planets, and then I'm going to say, okay, do you have the planet at a specific row? And in this case, we're going to call it an item. So we're going to say the index path dot, and then we're looking for, it should be item, which is the item in element of the index path, which is essentially going to be the same as the row, but for collection views, we use item. So once we do that, instead of setting the text to Mars, we can ask the planet for its information. So I'll say planet dot, and then the text label, I'm going to throw the name. And then for the image, I'm going to set up the image view of whatever you called yours. Yours might be different. We're going to set the image equal to planets.image. Running this, we should see our planets. Okay, back in business. If this is working for you, please raise your hands. If not, please let me know what's going on.
It's embarrassing, but I got the same problem on image view. Value of type UI view has no member image, but this time I checked the variable and it's correct.
Does it say UI view instead of UI image view?
Yeah.
You've connected the wrong outlet. So if you're in your main storyboard, just make sure that you reconnect your element. So if you click on your planet view cell, you need to select the image. I think you might have selected the view, and if you right click and drag the view over, that's going to cause some issues. So you're going to have to right click on view, remove any outlets on the storyboard itself. Then you're going to click on the image view itself, and you're going to hopefully see the file. If you don't see the file, switch in the jump bar. If it doesn't show up under automatic, go to manual and navigate to the file. So I'm going to go to automatic, click on the cell, and then reconnect that image cell.
Yep, it's UI image view now. That's what it was.
Yeah, so it's tricky. A lot of times I'll be doing this and I'll connect the wrong thing, and then I'll have to go back and fix it.
The only problem is I know I can just delete the other outlet in the code, but I know that doesn't fully do it. So
delete the outlet in the code, and then what you have to do is you have to find the view that you've connected it to, which is most likely the parent view that we added, and delete that connection. If you don't see it, another trick is to go to the connections and then select the entire view controller. And if you select the planets collection, you should see all of the connections, and you can go ahead and, actually this is just showing the collection view. So I'm gonna click on the planet cell, and I should see all of my connections here. And if you see a little orange or yellow symbol with the exclamation mark, you can go ahead and remove that and then just re-add it.
yeah, so when I do planet cell, I get the two connections. So I guess it was never in there in the first place. All right.
Super.
Oh, it's clipping the bottom of the letters, like the P and the Y that hang down below the baseline.
That's most likely a auto layout issue. I wouldn't worry about that just right now.
Okay.
My image and label just aren't showing up. Everything else shows up. I got the.
That could be an auto layout issue. This is a little bit finicky.
Oh, okay.
So why don't, if you're having issues with that, I don't know if you have auto layout constraints set up. Let me test something. So I'm going to select my cell. I don't want you guys to do this. I just want to see how we can triage this. I'm going to select my cell, and I'm just going to say clear constraints. That might make things disappear if you have the planet set, because now the planet is super big. If I make this really big, we can see the planet is like way down here. So this is an issue working with stack views. Things will get resized. So worst case scenario, you could remove them from the stack view and then add them directly, and we could worry about making it super pretty later on. So to remove them from the stack view, you would just drag them outside of it. And then if you were to run it, I'm going to see something super gnarly or something weird. Okay, apparently I broke things. So hopefully you would at least see like planet names. That would be a good indication. And then you might see the top left corner of a planet. I'm going to undo what I changed here. So we can debug that later. We should at least have something showing, and just seeing something is going to be an indication that we're sort of making progress in the right direction. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to be able to have a settings screen. So we're going to add a new view controller. So I want you to go ahead and add a view controller from the object library. I'm going to drag it out. This is going to be our settings screen. So I'm going to right click on the settings button that we added, and I'm going to right click and drag to the new screen. So right click from settings in this navigation bar to the other screen, and then we'll do a modal presentation, so present modally. So if you go ahead and select that. We should see a segue up here. We can give this a name. I don't think we're going to actually use it, but we could say show settings, just so that we have a name if we need to refer to it. That shouldn't really be necessary. And then we're going to add some UI components. So I'm going to add a done button to the top. When we display modally, it's not going to go away until we tell it to. So I'm going to go ahead and add a done button so we can have an action. And we need a settings. So let's go ahead and add a switch. I'm going to zoom in here so we can see this a little bit better. I'm going to have a switch, and then I'm going to have a label. We'll call the label something like should, what did I call this before? Should Pluto be a planet? Should be enough. And I'm going to set up auto layout constraints. I'm going to drag diagonally from the done button and set it up to the top space and the trailing space. So I'll select top and trailing space. That will pin it to the top right corner. And then I'm going to put these two in a horizontal stack view. So I'll do the embed in stack view. I'm not super concerned about this screen, so do whatever is going to work for you. And then I will pin this in place. So I'll pin it where it currently is, and then 16 to either side. And I don't want the bottom constraint, so I should have add 3 constraints. I'll go ahead and do that. Should stretch it out a little bit. So our position is here. We need a code file to go along with this user interface. So I'll try and run it right now just to see what it looks like. And if I click settings, we should see this modal pop up. Now, it's not going to go away without an unwind segue or a way to dismiss, so we need to add some logic. So we're kind of stuck on this screen. But this is what you should have. And now I'm going to jump into code. So make yours look like mine as much as you can. It's more important that we get the code connected before we really fine-tune the UI. So let's add a settings view controller. So I'm going to right-click on the top in my project navigator, and I'm going to say new file. We're going to go ahead, I'll do a Cocoa Touch class, and we will subclass from UI view controller. And I'll call this settings view controller. Go ahead and hit next and add that to the project. And then we need to connect this to the user interface. So to connect it, we go back into the storyboard. This should now become a little bit easier to remember these steps the more we do it. And I will select settings view controller. If that doesn't show up, make sure that you build or run the app so that the code file is now built. And then we should be able to set the class. Once you set the class, we want to connect the switch and the done button. So we want the actions, and we want to be able to set the switch as an outlet. So I'm going to go back to the assistant editor. I'll make this a little bigger. And I will select this screen. It should show me automatic, but if it's not, I might have to click off on something else. So I'll switch screens, and it looks like that made it fix. So now it shows automatic. So just switch your scenes by just clicking on them and then come back. Once we do that, what do I want to do? I want to connect some outlets, and I want to connect some actions. So there's two actions that we're going to have here. One, we're going to set up as an unwind segue, or potentially we could set up as a normal thing. Either one are totally okay. So what I'm going to do is let's set up this switch. I'll connect the switch to the bottom, and we're going to call this should show Pluto switch. This should be a outlet, so make sure it's an outlet. Hit connect. And then let's make an action above it. So this one, we're going to call it, let's say, I'll just say Pluto switch pressed or toggled. Either one is good. I might go with toggled. So Pluto switch toggled. And this should be an action. It's the value change. So we'll get the event when this flips and flops back. That gives us a hook. And I don't need this commented code, so I'm going to remove that. So we should have kind of a bare bones approach here. I'm going to add a stub to update the views. So I'll just create a private function. We'll come back to this. But essentially, this is going to be a to-do, update the switch based on saved data. This is kind of what we want to do. And then when this is toggled, what we want to do is we want to update the saved data. All right, and we're going to be using user defaults. So we should be pretty much hooked up with this screen. We don't currently have an exit, so maybe just for fun, instead of doing an unwind segue, let's go ahead and just add an action for this done button. And we'll say done button pressed, and I will connect that as well. All right, so with the done button press, let's see if we can dismiss the view controller that was presented modally. So I will call the dismiss function, and I will say animated is true. The completion block allows me to write extra code. I don't have anything else I want it to do. I just want it to disappear. And that will be that. So if we're looking at the code that I have a private function that's just a method stub. It's not doing anything. I just have a little statement inside. I've connected two actions. We've got the done button press. We've got the Pluto switch toggled. And I need to do something with the information. So that's where the NS user defaults is really going to help us. If you have this all connected and you run it and your done button works, raise your hand. It should not crash when you press either button. It's not going to update our model yet, so this is still going to always display the current set of planets. So now we're going to use the user defaults, and depending on which language you're working in, it's got two different names. It's NS user defaults in Objective-C, and it's user defaults in Swift. So if we pull open the documentation, as with anything that we're working with, looking at the documentation is really useful. So if we look up user defaults, we should see it. And I see it right here. We can basically store objects, we can store URLs, we can store arrays, dictionaries, strings, data, Boolean values, integer values, floating values, double values, and then we can set any of those values. So the user defaults is just a nice way to save information in your application. And this is generally used for small little settings, so you wouldn't want to store images in it. It's meant to be very quick and small pieces of information that is something like a setting screen. So configuring how an app looks, its appearance, if it's dark theme, light theme, stuff like that. These types of settings make a lot of sense for user defaults. In my own apps, one of the settings that I store, so if I'm looking at my super easy timer app, I store a setting when you first open the app if it's your first time. And so if that setting is not in the user defaults, and I know it's the user's first time, so after they've opened it once, then I know it's not their first time. And the reason I store that is because I have a tutorial screen, and the tutorial screen will display on start the first time a user opens the app, but it will not display on start every other time. So this allows them to sort of see how the app works. There's a series of videos and screenshots that show the user how the app works. So they can just sort of cycle through this, learn how all of the features work, and then if they have questions, they can send me an email. And if they hit finish, then they see the application. So little settings like these are really nice to store in the user defaults because it allows you to store quick bits of information without having to create a file. It's just stored in a special database called the user defaults. Okay, so what we want to save is basically a Boolean toggle. So there's a bool for key that we could potentially leverage in our code, and I think that's what we're going to use. So the bool is a true or false value, and this matches perfectly with our switch. This is going to be the on or off, which is the same as true or false. So what I need to do is I need to get access to the shared user defaults, and let's see. I'm going to start with setting it. So let's save the data first because we won't have anything to show if we don't save some information. So I can say let user defaults equal, and then there's a shared instance. So we'll see user defaults and it would be standard. So we'll see stuff like .default, .standard. Depending on the different classes we're using from Apple, they sometimes have shared objects and they have different names. So that's one of the things that will keep you on your toes. Again, you can always click on this to see more information about this. You can create your own, so you don't necessarily have to use Apple's. This is just kind of a convenience thing. So now what I want to do is I want to store this. So I'll ask the user defaults. There is a set method, and I want to set for a key. So I want to say set, and then I'm going to type 4 with the letters FOR, and then key. And I should, and I'm not seeing it because it, again, didn't uppercase U. So I'm going to fix that so it's a lowercase u, and I'll try typing this again. So if I start typing, I should get autocomplete. Make sure it selects that lowercase, do dot, and then we're going to do set for key, and so that should start to match. And so we should be able to just press enter, and then it's going to ask for a value. This one's populating with URL. It's not really going to match with URL. I'm going to pass it sender.isOn. And actually, because I didn't connect this, it's not going to exist. So you might have run into this in the project. So I want to use the isOn. The problem is this Pluto switch toggle was set to any class, and any class doesn't know anything about isOn. So to fix this, what I could have done when I created the connection, so if I create this connection again, if I had changed the type here from any to UI switch, that would have fixed the issue for me. So that's one way to get around this when I'm creating the action. Or I can just change this to UI switch. Since I know that I connected a switch, this should match and it shouldn't be a problem. And now if I'm typing sender.isOn, we should see it. So I know that some of you struggled with getting that connected or figuring that out. You could also use a guardlet and convert it. That's also another viable option. And then for the key, I'm just going to do show Pluto key. And that is going to basically tie this information, a Boolean value, to this value. So that's saving it. And then what I want to do is I want to load the setting. So if we go into update views, here's where I want to load the setting. So when we first see this, when the screen appears, and that's going to be on view will appear, I want to make sure that we're pulling in information from the database. So there's a method called view will appear that I will implement. And in here, I need to call super.viewWillAppear. Just one of the requirements for this method. Again, you can look at the documentation to understand it. It says you must call super in your implementation, so it's talking about calling this method. In here, I'm going to tell it to update views. So this is going to trigger, this line of code is going to trigger every time this appears. And I want to make sure that I'm updating my views. So I've got a function here to handle that logic. And in here, we want to set our switch. So we have a variable for our switch at the very bottom. And we can use that up in our update views. So what I want to do is I want to get the user defaults, and then I want to set my switch. Now I don't have to write this as 2 lines, so I'll show you the alternate approach. It just makes the lines a little bit longer, but I could just say user defaults.standard dot, and in this case, I'm going to be looking for a bool value for a key. So if I type bool for key, I should see this appear. I'll press enter, and then the key needs to match. So if we do something like this, this is going to give me a Boolean value back. And I want to store that, and I want to store that in the switch that I have at the very bottom. So my switch is called should show Pluto switch. So I'll say should show Pluto switch dot is on is equal to this value. And I had a spelling mistake. So that made this fail. Okay, so that is now hooked up. I've got 2 different keys.
Also, your show Pluto key.
What's that?
You correct the capitalization on show Pluto key.
Exactly. So there is an issue here. When we're saving this data, we need to spell it exactly the same. And the danger of having it written 2 places is that we can potentially make a spelling mistake, or we can potentially have a capitalization issue. So I want to show you a trick so that we can prevent this issue. To do that, we are going to create a class extension on the string class. And I think for simplicity's sake, I'm going to put it at the top of this file for now. So at the very top, I'm going to do extension string. And in here, what we'll want to do is we'll just add another attribute. So I'll show you how this is going to look in a second. So I'm going to create a static variable. And actually, this can be a let. It can be a constant. So I'll call it should show Pluto key. and I'll just set it to some value. I could set it to the same thing that it is. As long as I have this value here, it doesn't really matter what, but as a convention, I tend to like to make these match, so that's fine. And so what this is going to do is that this gives me an extension on a string. And this extension right here, let me just make this bigger. If I do a build, and I'll get rid of this breakpoint. If I have a string, so let's just, for example, have Pluto. What this is doing is it's adding another attribute to string. And so if I type should show Pluto key, I should see this appear on string. Oh, I take that back. It's on this. So I would say string dot should show Pluto. I can't do it on an actual instance of a string. So this adds a static property to a string that basically gives me this syntax. And this is useful in this particular instance. So when a function like this, the key here is a string value if we look at the documentation. So what I can do as sort of a shortcut, I'll keep both of these lines here just so that you can see the difference. I will copy this and I will modify it. So because this takes a string value, I can actually use dot syntax here, and I can type the full thing. So I could type string dot should show Pluto key, like that's totally valid. Or I could omit this first part and I could write it, I'll just show you another variation. I could write it like this. And so this is just something you'll see, and you should get autocomplete, so you'll see this key here. This is just a nice way of sort of making sure at compile time that these are going to match. And I will, again, do that for this bottom one. So instead of having multiple copies, I'll just fix this one. So I'm going to say for key dot should show Pluto key, and I should see that, and I can write that line.
Can you overdo this? Can you like make too many, or is there?
Nope, you can keep on doing it, and I would say this is a best practice, so that you can make your, not only is this descriptive, so we know what it is, we can customize it for all of the different settings in our app.
Paul, can I ask a question?
Yep.
Why do you make it an extension on string rather than just making it a variable within our class?
If it was a variable in my class, I could do the same thing. This is just a convention that I think a lot of the development community in Swift is doing now. So it's just something I wanted to show you. But we could totally put this in the class, or we could make it another property of the class, and that would be fine as well.
Well, if you put it in the class, once you have to access the class and then access the property, this way, whenever I guess the compiler is expecting a string, you can just go, dot should show Pluto key. Is that logic correct?
We can find out.
But you're in the class already.
But it's static, so the whole world will know about it.
Yeah, with an extension on string, you wouldn't. You'd be able to just go dot should show Pluto key.
Yeah,
in a different class.
If I'm here, I can't write dot key. It's going to give me a suggestion for the other one. If I want to use it, I would have to say something like settings view controller dot key, and I would see it. But I would be forced to write all of this. So it's kind of like a clever thing that allows me to not have to do it this way, if that makes sense.
Cool, thank you.
This is all nice, but in the user default line in your Pluto switch toggle function, key is actually just show Pluto key that you wrote, not should show Pluto key. That's the button.
What's the problem?
Oh no, you did change it.
I changed it, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so yours should look like this, and you should have something like this. If we run it, we can see if this is working, and basically what you would expect is that that button should stay toggled and on start. If it's untoggled, if I toggle it, I hit done, I quit the app, we come back, I go to settings, we should see that it's still toggled. That's how you know if this is working. Did I do that right? I don't think I did that right, actually. Done. I have to go to the task switcher. Then I throw it. Then I come back to it. Xcode's going to complain because we just quit the app. And then hopefully if I select it again, we go to settings, we should see it toggled. That's how we know if it's working. Now, the other thing that's not happening is Pluto didn't update in this user interface. So the last thing I want to show you before we wrap up is how to do that. So a quick way to do that is to go over to the Planet collection view. This is currently a static, not static, but it's just an array. We could do a computed property with this array, and in doing so, we could then look at our data to see if we should show Pluto or not. And if we should show Pluto, we can add it to the list. So I will do a transformation. I'm going to do a commit real quick just so I have a starting point. So added and what we did here was the settings screen and a user default for Pluto. If something's not working, sometimes I'll say the collection view does not support updating based on data yet. Okay, something like that. If I'm kind of in a pickle and I can't figure it out, or if I'm finished for the day and I want to make sure that I have a commit, you may or may not do this, but I like to sometimes have that as a safety net. And then I'll push that. So I think more commits are always better. You're going to get better as you do more of this. Don't worry on best practices with commits just yet. Just the best practice is to commit regularly when things are working. If it's not working, don't commit, because that makes it hard for someone else to follow. So the last thing that I need to do here is I will transform this code, and I'm trying to think of the easiest way to do that. I'm going to say var planets at the top. If I can spell this, is going to be an array of planets. And I'm going to set this as the computed property. So I'm going to do an open curly brace, and then at the very end, I'm going to do a close curly brace. When I do that, I'm going to select everything in here, and I'm going to indent with a command right square bracket. Indentation is entirely visual, so it's okay if you don't do that. And then I'm going to return planets here. This is a little confusing that they're named the same, so maybe I'll call this result instead, or array. You can call it something else, so I'll just make it so that it's got a different name. This does not have the Pluto planet in it. It is a variable, so I should be able to change it. And so what I want to look at is I want to know if I should show Pluto. So I can say let should show Pluto equal the result from the user defaults. So we'll just go ahead and grab our user defaults. We'll ask it for the bool for that value using that dot syntax. I should, and I actually have the wrong method here. I should do user defaults, sorry, standard dot now bool for key. So we got to make sure that we type this correctly, otherwise it's not going to do what we expect. This is expecting a string. Because I did an extension in the string, I can now use the dot syntax, and I should be able to say something like should show Pluto key, and that appears. And so this is going to pull that same information we just saved. And if we should show Pluto, then I'm going to append Pluto to the result. So I'll just say result dot append, and then we'll append Pluto. And for that, I'm going to create Pluto. So I will say planet, name, and then Pluto. And then I think it's a lowercase spelling. So I'll build and run as a sanity check and see if this is working. And then we are finished with the lesson. So I see Pluto is now there. The setting is on, so I'll turn the setting off. Pluto is still there. So what I need the view controller or the collection view controller to do is I need it to update the display based on if we're redisplaying the information. So in order to fix that issue, I'll share this code with you just via Slack for simplicity. I'm going to jump into my collection view controller, and I'm going to override the view did load. So anytime this appears, we're going to see the view will appear. So I'm going to look for view will appear. I'll call the super method because I'm supposed to. And then all I'll ask is the collection view. There should be a collection view property. We'll see it right here. I'm going to ask this to reload data, just like we would with a table view. So doing this, we should be able to run the app. And now we see Pluto is not a planet, which is what we expected. I'll toggle the switch. We see Pluto appears. I'll toggle the switch again. We see it disappears. I'll toggle it one more time, and then I will quit the app. So if I hit the stop in Xcode, that will quit the app. I'll run it. I expect to see Pluto as a planet. And there it is. So that's getting started with the collection views. I will investigate if there's any other documentation on why we had so much issues with the custom collection view cell. But that's a starting point. So you should have at least the framework for getting this working. I'll investigate how to make the UI a little bit easier. And I might record a short video or something on that, or point you to documentation. I'm not sure yet. Any questions?
Paul, can I see your extension one more time, please?
Which file are we in?
It's in the settings view controller.
Sorry, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I get a 1 to 3 rating on how you feel about collection views? All right, so my latest code should be committed and pushed. The final thing I want to go over before we wrap up is working in a pair. So after lunch, you're going to come back. You're going to work on the afternoon project. The afternoon project is a photo collection. You are going to be starting here. So this will be able to show different flowers. There's going to be a settings panel, just like we created in this project. So you'll be able to customize what style and attributes like that. And then you'll be able to add photos to the collection view from the UI image picker. So you'll go through and set that up. So what I'm going to do is show you how to get started. So this is the project link. I want you to work in pairs. So you're going to work with your PM to get in a group, just a 2-person group. I don't want 3-person groups because I think you'll do better with more time on the keyboard. And I want you to try and alternate. As you're doing, this is called pair programming. As you're doing this, you're going to be talking back and forth. You're going to be thinking through the challenges. You're going to be trying to set up stuff. One of you is going to be typing. You're going to make typos like I did today, and how Samira corrected me. I had a typo. You're going to be working together to solve those types of problems. So what you're going to do, I want everyone, one person in your pair is going to fork. So you're going to click fork. I'm going to fork this to my personal account. And then I am going to clone this to my disk. So for simplicity, I'm going to put this on my desktop. Click the clone button. I'm going to grab the link of my fork. So it should say Paul Solt, or it should say your name and saying it's forked from Lambda. You're going to come in here and clone it. So this should be relatively straightforward by now. Go ahead and clone that repository. You're going to go into that repository. You're going to make some changes. So in this case, there is no Xcode project. So you're going to go ahead, create an Xcode project, save it in that location. So to get started, I will create an Xcode project, single view app, and I'm going to call it photo collection. So one of you is going to be doing this. The other is going to be watching via Zoom. You're going to hit next. You're going to find wherever you saved it, and you can just create your Xcode project here. It's already should be a Git repository, so we can just create. Don't worry about that, and it should be in sync. So now I want all of this in the project, so I'm going to do a commit from Xcode, and I'll say added starter Xcode project. I think I don't want you to commit the user data. It would be really nice if we had a git ignore file in here. So I would recommend turning those off for now. And then I will commit those. And then I will push that. So git status in terminal. I will push the changes. I'm going to ignore these other files for a second. I'm going to go back to GitHub. The easiest way to add, so I'll refresh this. I should see my new project. Now I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to add the .gitignore. I'll click on this, select Swift from the drop-down over on the right side. So if you're watching my screen, this is how we add the gitignore quickly. And I'll just commit this. It's going to give me a base message. It says it created the gitignore, which is fine. And the other thing you have to do is whoever you're collaborating with, you need to add as a collaborator. So you'll have to type your password to edit this screen. And then I'm going to look for Moses. So I'm going to go ahead, find Moses, and
Robinson.
What was it?
The ROBINS one.
Yes. So once I find my partner, I'm going to add him. He should get an email link, and he will be able to clone the repository and make a commit. So just for simplicity, I'm going to go back to my this is my link. So I'm going to send this to Moses. And so now he can clone this repository, pull it down. And so as I'm working, we can sort of go back and forth. We can talk about the project. It might be beneficial to just read through it first so that you have a base level understanding before you start working in the project. And then try and figure out how to implement the screens. One person is going to be writing the code, setting up the user interface. And if you want to switch, then you need to make sure that you push those changes. So since I made changes, I'm going to do a git pull. And that added the git ignore. So that came from the web interface. If I do a git status, I'm going to do a git reset. I don't know if I want those staged yet. So I'm going to do a git reset and then do a git status. And it looks like some of those files are not being tracked anymore, which is what I wanted. They will change each time you do a commit, which makes it a little challenging in a team environment. So I'm going to commit this, I think, and I'll just commit this one file, added shared project file, but I didn't want the others. So that was a git reset that removed them from being staged. So if you see that issue, you can do that. I will commit this. Git status should show me I'm ahead. I will push this. And now Moses can make changes based on this. So if I want to hand this off to Moses, now we can switch our screen share. Moses can start sharing his screen, and he can start driving as we're doing the code. Does anyone have any questions about pair programming?
I don't have a question. I just want to show everyone something that would be really cool and I think really help with pair programming. At the top of the Zoom window when you're viewing someone else's screen, or at the top of the screen if you're full screen, there's a View Options button. And if you go down on that, there's an Annotate option. And the one I like the most is called the arrow.
Is it the mouse? Oh, okay. So that's another draw. You can
Sorry, I was muted there for a second.
You can mark up the screen and point to something. So if someone's stuck, you can tell them where to look.
Yes, exactly.
And then there's a clear button. So you guys can't see this because I'm sharing my screen. I will hit clear and clear all my drawings. And then do I have to hit the X? I think I have to hit the X on this. So I took a screenshot of it so I can at least show you what I'm seeing because you don't see my controls. We're talking about this annotate button on the share screen. So this appears only on your screen when you're sharing your screen. And then the other button that you're seeing is this window. Clicking the draw allows you to sort of mark up the screen. And if you want to stop marking it up, there's the clear button that's right here. And then the X button closes this window.
Thanks for elaborating on that.
Yep. So Moses, were you able to do any kind of commits to my repository?
I'm cloning the new one again. I was just going to add a small comment in there.
Okay. So if I wanted to, again, I would stop sharing screen and then Moses would start sharing his screen and then he would start taking over. And when you do this, Moses, if you could just show us doing a pull request. We're just going to have one pull request and you're going to tag your PM and he's going to do a commit, write some logic, and then push that change. Cool. Any questions on any of the material we covered? I know it took a little bit longer because of the collection view layout issues. All right. Well, it is now lunchtime after we get this commit in there, and I want you guys to take a break. I know this was a little bit long, so walk around, eat lunch, take a short power nap if you like doing that type of thing, anything that's going to help you to have success this afternoon. Can I get a hand raise if the pair programming instructions make sense? So Moses is doing the pull request. He's clicking the button. He's describing it, whatever we've done, and he's going to tag his PM. Thank you. I will catch you guys later.
Thanks.
Hey, Paul, do you have a moment? I just have a question about the very beginning of the when you were typing in like 1 cell, 2 cells, 20 cells.
Yeah.
The cells are set by the code, so I think I ran into an error based on what.
So if you have more than one cell of the same cell identifier, you're going to have an error. So that's why I always set it back to 1.
Okay, yeah. So I did that, and then I just ran into some weird problems. I really only have 1 cell.
And
when I press,
what do you see?
well, I do have 1 error in my run having to do with that identifier should show Pluto key, which, let's see.
There's a dot in front of it.
Okay.
Which should,
yeah,
it's a shorthand that should, if you've got that defined in an extension. Did you do the extension?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
So just as proof.
It might not be finding it.
There it is. Should show Pluto key.
Excellent. Okay. Maybe we just need to hit Command B.
Are
we good?
Well, it's going to run, but I don't think
hit the run button. You built it, so let's now run it.
I don't think it's going to show anything, but I could be wrong. I don't know if that's to do with the constraints or something I did wrong where the cells just aren't showing up.
Okay, so let's take a look at the user interface. Or actually, before we go there, let's look at the collection view controller. Did it work when you did like the 5 cells, or did that not display anything either?
That didn't display anything either. Oh, okay. So I have number of
sections. Okay, yeah. So do 1, or you can delete that method. The default behavior should be to return 1. So if you don't implement it, that should fix that. So if you run it again.
Okay, so because I didn't start from scratch like you did. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. All right. Have fun.
Absolutely.